Hello and welcome back to Pondering the Orb. As always, I'm your host, the wandering fantasy author Jay Requard, and this is my show about books, music, and more. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. What can I say about root magic that hasn't already been said about this wonderful middle grade fantasy? Published by Walden Pond Books, this novel and its author deserves every single flower it has gotten. Written by the amazingly talented Eden Royce, this story follows siblings Jez and Jay Turner as they discover their family's ancestral magic in the midst of 1963 South Carolina. Centered around exploration of South Carolina's Gullah culture and its history, this wonderful narrative not only provides two great heroes any child can look up to, but strives to create a compelling story captured within some terrifically intricate world building fostered on its accuracy and an appreciation of the author's cultural roots. Royce is a master of the craft, putting together deeply written characters within a world brought to life by a truly unique and enthralling voice. Whether you're a child or an adult, Root Magic is a must-read. Chapter 1. When Gullah people die, babies in the family get passed over the coffin so the dead person won't come back from beyond to take them away. No one did that day with me and my twin brother, Jay, of course. We were about to turn 11 years old, and that was too old to get passed over the coffin. Instead, me and Jay stood next to Mama and my uncle, Doc Buzzard, in that graveyard, listening to the pastor say lots of good things about Gran. The noonday sun beat down on the back of my neck, and beads of sweat dotted my forehead. Heat pressed in on me like an ant I didn't want to hug. Every so often, a rush of breeze blew off the ocean and across the marsh. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, cooling my hot skin. A huge, deep rectangle was dug into the moist, black dirt, and we all stood around it in a circle. Me, Jay, Mama, and Doc were in the front, and behind us stood other people from the island. Over my shoulder, I saw many people who weren't family, but came to pay their last respects to Gran, standing nearer to the shade of the huge evergreen trees lining the cemetery edges. Gran had been the best root worker for miles around, and she had helped all of them at some point. She could make potions to give folks luck to win a court case or make their boss less angry. She could create compresses to draw out poisons and snake bites. Some people thought root work was from the old school, or even fake, but everyone who knew Gran and Doc knew better. Even the pastor said it was a great loss to the community that Gran was gone. He said it must have given her some peace to hear President Kennedy's speech earlier this summer on the radio. It called for all people in America, including Negroes, to have equal access to jobs and public school education. While Gran wouldn't be here to see it, she had left this world knowing that better days were coming. I looked at all the people here to celebrate Gran's life. But my life felt like a puzzle I didn't know how to put together. On one hand, I missed Gran so much. I wished she would come back, and things would return to the way they were before she died. But on the other, I wanted better days. And I knew Mama wanted something better for all of us. Something better than, well, just about everything that happened since Daddy left. Early that morning, Mama wove palmetto leaves into roses for us to wear at the funeral. She tried to show me how to do it, bend and twist and pull the long, flat leaves into spiral flower shape, but my fingers were too clumsy and I couldn't get the leaves to do what I wanted. She had to take mine away and weave the rose herself. Then she pinned it to the front of my dress like a piece of jewelry. Mama was in her best Sunday outfit. A black short-sleeved dress, white gloves, and black patent leather heels. A wide-brimmed hat covered her black hair, which she had pressed straight with a hot comb off the stove that morning. She was patting the tears off her smooth brown cheeks with a starch-white handkerchief. Doc, however, wasn't doing any of that. He just held his good hat in his hand and let the tears run down his face and into his bushy salt and pepper beard. I couldn't cry. I felt so much hurt inside, but it wouldn't come out. Like the time I fell out of the big live oak tree near our house and couldn't breathe. Mama said I had just had the wind knocked out of me, and I would feel better soon. I hoped I would feel better soon after losing Gran. Emptiness opened up in my heart, and I wondered if it would ever be full again. Her stories of Briar Rabbit's tricks on the other animals always made me laugh. She even told good scary stories about haints and spirits, creatures that she said roamed around South Carolina marshes where we lived. Some of these creatures used to be people. Others were things that no one understood, but everyone knew best to stay away from. I loved her stories about boo hags best. They were night creatures with blue skin they could remove before slipping under doors and through keyholes. When I trembled, she would hug me tight and tell me she would always keep me safe from them. I hugged her back and told her I knew they were only stories, and not really real. After the pastor finally finished talking, the pallbearers lowered the wooden coffin with my gran in it into the huge rectangle in the ground. Each one of the family members in turn threw a handful of dirt into the grave after saying goodbye. First Doc, then Mama, then Jay. Your turn, Jezebel, Mama whispered, smoothing her hand up and down one of my pigtails. In the heat of the late summer, the scent of her bergamot hair pomade was like sweet, sun-hot oranges. I walked up to the big hole in the earth and looked inside. Sunlight reflected off the polished wood, almost blinding me. It wasn't only a hole. It was Gran's final resting place. The place I would have to come back to if I wanted to visit her. In the pocket of my good Sunday dress, the black and gray striped cotton one, I felt for the doll Gran gave me and squeezed it. She made it out of crocus, a gunny sack fabric, and used scraps of bright cloth to make a dress and head wrap for her. Then, just before she died, she breathed into the doll and pressed it into my hand. She was too tired to do any more than that before she fell back on the bed. Later, Doc told me that Gran's breathing into the doll gave it some of her spirit, and it would be a way she could be with me, even after she was gone. I named the doll Dina. Everyone was waiting for me now, so I crouched down and grabbed a big handful of dirt and sprinkled it onto the coffin. The dirt hitting the box sounded like heavy raindrops falling on the roof of our house. It sounded like an ending. Goodbye, Gran, I whispered, sobs clogging my throat. I miss you already. Only then did I finally cry. Tears hotter than the air around us rained down my face and neck, wetting the collar of my dress. But I didn't care. Those tears were the last thing I'd ever be able to give my grandmother, and I wanted her to have all I had. Once the grave was filled in, we left small gifts on top of it. Jay brought Gran's favorite cup, the one with a tiny chip in it where he dropped it on the floor. I tied a strip of fabric from her apron around the handle, and we set it on the mound of dirt. Mama left a shell, polished smooth from the ocean water running over it. Doc kissed a tiny bottle of some liquid he pulled from his pocket and pressed it into the dirt. After the repast lunch the people of the church made for us, we walked home along the hard-packed dirt path that led from the cemetery all the way to our house. We lived on a sea island called Wadmalaw, about 20 miles from Charleston, the biggest city in South Carolina, and our house was right on the water, next to the salt marsh. Our family had a part of those marshlands that was just ours and nobody else's. We'd catch food there, like fish and shrimp and blue crabs. It was also a place for me and Jay to run and play. Our neighbors around us had their own parts of the saltwater inlet too, where they would also go fishing. We all respected each other and would always ask permission before going into someone else's land to catch food. I could taste the salty breeze from the ocean on my tongue as we got closer to home. Me and Jay walked side by side, a respectable distance behind Mama and Doc. I don't want to start school again tomorrow, Jay said. I miss Gran, and I ain't ready for summer to be over. Shh, I replied, pointing to Mama and Doc. We were close enough to hear what they were talking about. Root work. I knew a little bit about root work from all the time I spent with Gran and Doc after school. Mama was always getting home late ever since she opened her roadside market stall. And on Saturdays, when Mama sold the sweetgrass baskets she made along with our extra vegetables at the stall, me and Jay spent all day with Gran. We helped her pick flowers and roots she would mix with water and rum to make perfume. Once my hands got steady enough, she even let me pour the sweet, flowery perfume into little clear glass bottles that Mama would sell at her stall the next day. Once, last year, I asked Gran to teach me and Jay some root magic. You were already doing it by helping me make the perfume, she said, but then she added that we would learn more when the time was right. I pouted while Jay sucked his teeth, but Gran laughed and said she would show us her biscuit recipe instead. Gran made the best biscuits. Warm, fluffy dough with a fine layer of crisp butteriness along the edges. All my pouting was gone at the thought of getting to eat those perfect little circles, and Jay's stomach rumbled. Me and Jay raced to get all the ingredients she said she needed, while she added wood to her cast-iron stove in the kitchen. Now, Jay nudged me with his scrawny elbow, bringing me out of memory. We were almost home. We turned onto the path that led out to the marsh. Dust still clung to his black shoes as he shuffled his feet along the path. I loved running and playing outside, even sinking my feet into the marsh's pluff mud. which was warm and soft as cake batter. But this was my best dress, and if it got too dirtied up, Mama would tell my head a mess. You hear Doc and Mama say root? He asked. I nodded. I couldn't tell what they were discussing, though. Me neither, Jay said. Hiss a tail, y'all, Mama called back over her shoulder as she and Doc picked up the pace. I knew what that meant. It was Gullah for hurry up. Gullah was a language of English mixed with different West African languages. It's what the people who were forced to be slaves, my foremothers and forefathers, ended up speaking after they were first brought here to the Carolinas hundreds of years ago. It belonged to us. My family still spoke it sometimes, to each other and to other people on the island who knew the language. Mama wanted me and Jay to speak English. She felt it gave us a better chance to do well in school and get a good job later on in life. Gran spoke Gullah a lot. Hearing it just then made me feel closer to her. Still, Mama's words were sharp. It was her business voice, so me and Jay ran to catch up. We were close enough now to home that I could see Gran and Doc's root workshop. Now just Doc's shop, I suppose, and our little shotgun house in the distance, and we came alongside the start of our farm and our full, late summer crops. Our vegetables were ripe, and I could smell the scent of tomato leaves. Bees buzzed all around us, bobbing in the thick, steamy air. A few wide-winged butterflies soared over our heads, and I knew they could smell the fresh green scent on the vines, too. Rows and rows of fat and red-orange tomatoes hung on our vines. There were lots of green snap peas, stalks of yellow sweet corn, sweet island red peas, crookneck squash, benet seeds, and purple okra that looked like fingers reaching for the sky. Just last week, we helped Mama plant collard and mustard green seeds and sweet potatoes to harvest later in the fall and into the winter. We had eggs from our many chickens all year round. There was even a fig tree. Sometimes, Mama had me and Jay pick figs for her to make into jam and sell. Along with rice and seafood from the marsh and ocean around us, the crops we grew and the eggs we collected were what we ate, and also what Mama sold to support us at her stand. It's too hot out here to argue, Mama was saying to Doc. We'll finish this discussion once we get home. Getting home wouldn't take much longer. As we passed the crops, we came to the root working shop. It was a small cabin, with wooden clapboards blasted by the sun and sea salt air until they turned grayish-brown. The cabin stood all alone by itself on the road to our house, and it was the place Doc did all of his business. Everywhere you looked inside were rows and rows of wooden shelves, and on every shelf was some kind of bottle or jar or basket filled with a liquid or a powder, or even whole dried flowers or curls of shaved tree bark. The cabin smelled like a flower shop inside a forest. Fresh turned dirt, sweet spices, and pine, surrounded by new blossoms. The customers loved that smell. They would come to buy a potion, but would usually end up talking to Doc for a while. Doc gave good advice to the people of our community, and not just about magic or medicine. He had what Gran used to call good common sense, and people came from all around to ask what he thought about a certain brand of fertilizer, or what he heard about a company that was hiring workers. Doc's advice made me think of Gran, and tears burned in my eyes again. Before Gran got sick, she used to be the one everyone in town went to for her opinion, and she was always happy to give it to people in need. She didn't like to take money for it either. But a lot of the local people, called binyas in Gullah, were so grateful they brought things anyway. People would come up the path to the house with bags of fresh caught shrimp, or a bushel of snapping blue crabs, or a few whiting just off the fishing pole. Gran would give the bag to me and Jay and sit down with her guests at the kitchen table. At the sink, me and Jay would clean the guts out of the fish and take the heads off the shrimp while Gran listened. Once the person was done explaining, Gran then told them what she thought they should do with their problem. Her visitors would always get up and leave happier than when they came. I wanted to be able to do that for people one day. I was so caught up with what was in my own head that I wasn't looking where I was going. I ran smack into the back of Mama. Since Jay was right beside me, he bumped into the back of Doc, and our uncle reached down and placed a hand on Jay's shoulder to stop him from moving around and running up to the house. "What's going on?" I started to ask. "Hush now," Mama said. That's when I saw why both Mama and Doc had frozen all of a sudden. A police car was parked right in front of our porch. The red and blue lights on top of the car weren't on, but it still made me nervous. The black and white car stood smack dab in the middle of the path, between us and our house. And on our porch, up the rickety front steps Gran had made Doc fix a few months ago, was a policeman. Deputy Collins was standing there like he owned the place, hands on his hips, one of them near the gun strapped to his right leg. He had a rail-thin body, but with loose, floppy cheeks like a bloodhound. Sweat stains showed under his arms as he looked down at us. The porch overhang threw deep shadows on his pale face. Mama's whole body was stiff next to me. Her hand shook it as she grabbed mine a little too hard and pulled me behind her. When I looked over at Jay, Doc had a hand on his head, doing the same. Doc's usually sunny, smiley face was blank as a chalkboard. A bead of sweat rolled off my forehead, stinging my eyes, but I didn't dare move to wipe it away. I clutched at Mama's hand, and she squeezed it before letting go. She stood up real straight, putting iron in her back, Gran used to call it, and then she stepped forward. On Pondering the Orb, I try to bring you a diverse array of nonfiction choices, but one sincere interest of mine is in economics. I want to offer you an entryway into this topic by recommending books that provide an informative but fun way in. One of those books is Talking to My Daughter About the Economy, or How Capitalism Works, and How It Fails, by someone who is a personal hero of mine, Yanis Varoufakis. The former finance minister of Greece during the 2008 economic global downturn and a professor of economics, I began following this lion for humanity when he bravely fought for the rights of his country against a capitalistic paradigm still bearing itself down upon every single one of us. This book, presented as a series of lessons for his daughter, instructs us on the basis of economics on varying levels from the personal to the global, but presents its subject matter in plain language that anyone can understand. I'm proud to read from this book because this book should be a primer in curriculums across the world. Children should know how to fight back. Chapter 1. Why so much inequality? All babies are born naked, but soon after some are dressed in expensive clothes bought at the best boutiques, while the majority wear rags. Once they've grown a little older, some get annoyed every time relatives and godparents bring them yet more clothes, since they would prefer other gifts, such as the latest iPhone, while others dream of the day when they might be able to head to school without holes in their shoes. This is the kind of inequality that defines our world. From a young age you seemed aware of it, even though it was not part of your everyday life, because, truth be told, the school we send you to isn't attended by children condemned to live the lives of deprivation or violence, as the overwhelming majority of the world's children are. More recently you asked me, why so much inequality, Dad? Is humanity that stupid? My answer didn't satisfy you. Or me, for that matter. So please let me give it another try, by posing a slightly different question this time. Why didn't the Aborigines in Australia invade England? Living and growing up in Sydney as you do, your school teachers have spent many hours in lessons making you and your classmates aware of the hideous injustices perpetrated by white Australia on the country's original inhabitants, the Aborigines, of their splendid culture, which white European colonialists trampled underfoot for more than 2 centuries, and of the conditions of shocking poverty in which they still live as the result of centuries of violence, theft, and humiliation. But did you ever wonder why it was the British who invaded Australia, seizing the Aboriginals' land just like that, almost wiping them out in the process, and not the other way around? Why didn't Aboriginal warriors land in Dover, quickly advancing to London, murdering any Englishman who dared resist, including their queen? I bet not one teacher at your school dared to raise that question. But it is an important question, and if we don't answer it carefully, we risk thoughtlessly accepting either that the Europeans were ultimately smarter and more capable, which was certainly the view of the colonizers at the time, or that the Aboriginal Australians were better and nicer people, which is why they themselves didn't become brutal colonizers. Even if it were true, this second argument boils down to much the same thing as the first. It says there's just something intrinsically different between white Europeans and Aboriginal Australians, without explaining how or why, and nothing legitimizes crimes like those committed upon the Aborigines and others better than arguments of this sort. These arguments must be silenced, if only because they can emerge from within your own mind, tempting you to accept that history's victims deserved what they got because they were not smart enough. So, the original question, why so much inequality between peoples, blends into another, more sinister question. Is it not simply that some groups of people are smarter and, as a result, more capable than others? If this is not the case, why is it you've never seen in the streets of Sydney the kind of poverty you've encountered on your visit to Thailand? Markets are one thing, economies are another. In the bubble of Western prosperity you're growing up in, most grown-ups would say to you that poor countries are poor because their economies are weak. Whatever that means. They would also say to you that poor people in your community are poor because they do not have anything to sell that others really want. That, in short, they have nothing to offer the market. This is why I decided to talk to you about something called the economy. In your world, and mine, any discussion of why some people are poor whereas others are stinking rich, or even why humanity is destroying planet Earth, revolves around that thing called the economy. And the economy is related to that other thing known as the market. To have any say in humanity's future, you cannot afford to roll your eyes and switch off the moment words like economy and market are mentioned. So let me begin with a common error that many make. They think that markets and the economy are one and the same thing. They are not. What exactly are markets? Markets are cart of exchange. At the supermarket, we fill our cart with things in exchange for money, which the seller, the owner of the supermarket, or the employee paid with money from the register, later exchanges for other things that they want. Before money was invented, exchanges were direct. A banana would be exchanged directly for an apple, or maybe two apples. Today, with the internet in full swing, a market does not even have to be a physical place, like when you get me to buy you apps on iTunes or vinyl records from Amazon. Obviously, we've had markets since we were living up in trees, since before we developed the capacity to grow food. The first time one of our ancestors offered to trade a banana for some fruit, a market of exchange of sorts was in the air. But this was not a true economy. For an economy to come into being, something else was needed, a capacity to go beyond just gathering bananas from trees or hunting animals, a capacity to produce food or instruments that would have not existed without human labor. The final book we'll be looking at today is my own. This is A Wave of Lions, Salt Songs of the Mirror Sea, as published by Falstaff Books and written by me, J. Requard. Late into the summer, it's finally time to hit the beaches one last time, or keep inside from the goddamn heat. And without speaking too highly of it, I'm fortunate enough to present you with 3 books of magic, mayhem, and adventure upon the high seas. This will help pass the time wherever you decide to stay. This is the perfect late summer read for fans of Pirates of the Caribbean and Conan the Barbarian, but with a deeper focus on family, enduring the challenges thrown at us in life, and finding purpose in things like love and courage. Starring Captain Nagala and his children, Tossi and Zaki, they must face off against sorcerers, monsters, and great empires while roving the mighty Mirror Sea. This edition of the narrative collects all 3 books together, so you get a bang for the buck. Let's read, and I hope you will click the link in the description and pick up this book. As always, please rate and review. Chapter 2. Shallow Bay. The sun had freed itself from the horizon by the time Nagala scrambled to the top deck. Its light flamed over the Mirror Sea until the waves shimmered like heated silver. His boat's course still set westward, and he spotted 3 orange sails in the opposite direction, their color clear in the morning. "Get the rowers set," Nagala told Zaki, who stayed with him at the Gamka's rail on the trireme's starboard stern. "Set shifts for the half hour until the next dawn. I'll try to keep the sail on your side for most of it. I'll keep Nukuku playing a steady beat," she said before retreating below deck. He looked to his youngest son standing on the port side. Tossi stared, dead-eyed in the face of their oncoming enemy. "Order the raiders to get their bows ready," Nagala told him. "I'll let you decide when to volley." Tossi glanced to his father. "Are you planning to slow down?" Unlocking the steering oar, Nagala searched for Jute's coast to the north, trying to place where they were. "Not if I have to." He leaned to the left, beginning the trireme's gentle correction northward. Wind caught in the mainsail, stretching the green cloth at the corners of its rigging. The Gamka hurried, the sea calm for the first few miles, its rhythm easy as the ship's bronze rostrum parted the waters like a knife. The Latians turned in chase. Zaki popped her head out of the hold, face beaded in sweat. "Banks are set if you cut sail. I had them put their clubs on their benches." "We're not cutting the damn sail!" Nagala wrestled the steering oar. He had set the Gamka at an angle that would bring her close to the coast, which means they would soon contend with the sea's morning chop. The hull had soaked in enough water to worry about sluggishness. "Get the map. I need to know where I am." Zaki's head disappeared under the deck when the prow struck new tides, bumping the water hard. Sea spray, cold and crisp, wetted Nagala's face, chest, and hands as it washed him. He grinned when the oar in his hand started to fight again, pressured to turn west by forces only Oila, goddess of the seas, knew the secrets of. Bare feet on the wet boards, he balanced himself to the rocking surface of his boat, knowing he had spilled more of his own blood on her than any other. This boat was his, and she would give him everything. Nagala had to show her the same. Miles passed by, and the Latian's orange sails closed. The wind held for Nagala, his experience easing the Gamka through rough tides as his razors had belted on their quivers and strung their bows in the center of the deck. Tossi split his 40 troops into 3 groups, one for the shield wall to protect his battery of archers, and the second and third groupings lined the rails of the boat, knelt down in preparation to face boarders if the Latians found some way to grapple onto their ship. "Ready!" shouted Tossi, pulling an arrow from his quiver. His archers obeyed, setting shafts to bowstrings. They stared eastward, squinting against the bright orb in the sky. Zaki rose from the hold for the second time, bringing along a sack of wooden slats wrapped in a tan cowhide. "We're dead to west." Nagala fought to keep the boat straight. "Where's Nakuku at?" "Ready to beat down the day if you tell him to." Zaki unrolled the bundle in her sinewy arms, laying out the 10 wooden slats on the deck near where her father stood. Each slat, painted in a series of black hashes, came together to form an image of the southern continent of Jute. A long coastline built upon thousands of years of civilization, human or otherwise, stretched far to the east and west. A recently applied red splotch on the map marked the port of Boda. Zaki knelt over the map, doing her best to keep the slats together. "We hit Boda at midnight. It's been 9 hours since we left," Nagala said, the sun on the back of his shaven head. Zaki's voice was lost as the wind shifted direction, its force buffeting against the portside bow. Nagala locked the rudder under his armpit to keep them headed north. "Where are we, Zaki?" he grunted through the effort. "Shallow Bay," Zaki shouted back at him. "We're close to Shallow Bay." Nagala cursed under his breath. "Is that the closest beach? It's the only one where we won't be arrested if we land." The wind clapped the green sail, leaving it slack as the wind failed to gather. Teeth gritted, Zaki bounded forward like a cat, halfway into the hole down to the hold. "Stroke! Stroke! Stroke!" From the dim maw came the stirring heart of the rowers. The first double strike pushed the oars out the trireme's flanks, the second dipped them into the water, dragging against the sea current. The third strike drove the Gamco with more strength than it held. The cuckoo's 4-on-4 drum beat rumbled the boards, echoing beneath the deck in typhoon song. The oars answered in refrain, their blades cutting into the mirror's surface like lightning bolts. The 3 Latian triremes, now a few miles off, began to shrink slightly, flagging on the sprint towards Jute's coast. Nagala ordered a few of Tossi's raiders to strike the sail before it dragged against their momentum, which drew the wrathful youth back to the steering oar. "We cannot outrun them," he shouted, stopping beside his kneeling sister as she disassembled the map. "Cut to 3 beats. My archers will slow them." "Go back to your men," Zaki chided her brother. "We've not the blood to spare." "Where are we going, Captain?" Tossi asked his father, ignoring her. Nagala looked at his son, speechless for a moment. The sun was behind them, the Latians in sight, and the chance of turning west plotted a course to a death the Westerners would gladly chase them toward. "Get your men back in formation, boy," Nagala ordered. "Keep the raiders low so their bodies do not break the wind. Have a team ready to raise the sail when I find it." "Where are we going?" Tossi asked again, a deeper note edging his voice. "We are going to Shallow Bay," Nagala answered. The weight of the words bent his posture. "We'll lose them in the Avarice Reefs." Niam's orb had crested the sun's apex when Nagala let Nakuku's beat rattle the oars as the Gamco rode the outlying edges of Avarice Reef, shards of yellow shining dull gold beneath the crystal blue waters of Shallow Bay. The beating sun, white and blazing in a cloudless sky, lingered hot upon the black shoulders of the deck crew, who hid in the shadows of their hide shields held above their heads. Bows and arrows rested by their crossed legs, ready for the moment they were needed. "They turning yet?" Zaki asked, seated beside her father as she hid in the shadow of the starboard rail. Sipping from a small water gourd, she watched from afar as the raiders sat in their loose zigzag formation, perfectly still against the assault of the sea, salt, and wind. After hours at the rudder, Nagala's ankles creaked as he pivoted, checking over the stern. The Latian triremes had drifted into a single file in order to follow them into the reefs. Orange sails struck. They rowed after the core sails with clean white oars. "Not yet. They're in single file, though. Still have to lose the first one." He glanced to Zaki. "What's wrong?" "You know he's crazy, right?" Nagala looked ahead to the ship's bow, where Tossi sat alone. Fixing his shield into a slanting roof to protect him from the sun, he stared out from his shadow, watching the entire deck like a sea eagle would watch the water for prey. He swept the world in expectation of a cruelty he found more than happy to return. Father studied son for long, long moments. No more than I was. But you didn't terrify the rowers, Zaki quickly replied. Not like Tossie. Does Tossie really terrify the rowers, he asked, annoyed at the accusation made towards his youngest, no matter if it came from the same blood. Tossie terrifies everyone. Zaki brought her focus back to her father, looking up at him with her bright brown eyes. Nukuku even mentioned it to me. Age settled Nagala's eyelids, closing his vision as he shook his head. Why has no one mentioned it to me? Because everyone loves you too much. We cannot wait for you to be old bones. Zaki's face opened in a sorry grin. But I feel he's not the only child people are concerned with. That I do not hear. Daughter returned to her watch of the raiders. Hard, taciturn men with hard views and harder thoughts. Wait till we get back. They will have had time to think. Nagala sighed at his daughter's pessimism, a recent shift that had come with so many changes. Checking the stern again, a brief chance to think on what to say. His efforts petered when he noticed the Latians had shifted drastically westward, back towards the waters where they claimed sovereignty. Not far to the north, he could see the shores of Shallow Bay. The white sand beaches vanished into the immediate walls of green, the towering border of the infamous glass jungle. Relief ebbed to panic. "Halt the oars!" Nagala shouted, searching for the peg needed to lock the steering oar. "Ready sail! Raiders at time!" Zaki dashed onto the deck, shouting for Nukuku. Finally jamming the peg in its correct slot, Nagala let his hand pull away from the oar's handle, confident when it jerked out of his grip with a knock. He ducked under the rising ropes as they were pulled taut, lengthening lines raised by the raiders as they prepped the sail for a light breeze from the southwest. The oars retracted into the boat, and from below came Zaki, flanked with 10 rowers carrying the long poles used to navigate reefs and shallow inlets. Both Tossie and Zaki met their father on his way to the Gamka's bow, the younger speaking first. Why did they turn? Tossie demanded to know, looking far to the south at the diminishing points of orange. Latians don't break off a chase unless they have to, Nagala said as he glanced over the port side bow, catching a glimpse of the rostrum cutting the water. They know something we don't. Then we should turn, said Zaki. Or perhaps they grew tired of chasing us and decided to make from home. Tossie roared and his hyena laughed, the muscles of his face creating cruel lines. They realized they were simply too slow, and the corsair ship slammed to a stop in the water, a cracking boom that deafened Nagala as he flung forward, crashing hard into the trireme's bow post. He grabbed enough of the sharp wood to halt the pitch overboard. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Tossie tumble through the air, colliding with the surface of the water before flopping into the clear blue. Boy reemerged seconds later, vomiting seawater as he struggled to stay afloat. "Check the hull!" Nagala screamed to whoever listened. Zaki darted by, leaping beautifully into the air and piercing the water in a perfect dive. Kicking to Tossie, she dragged her flailing brother to the port side. Raiders and rowers rushed to meet her, arms outstretched. Tossie fought those that hauled him from the water, thrashing as he cursed at them. Set on the deck, he slapped away all further attempts to help. "Down sail, you fucking idiots!" Tossie reeled in rage before he settled on Nagala, who still busied helping Zaki up the port side of the prow. "What happened?" "Dead in the water, Captain," one of the raiders called. He pointed with his short spear over the side. "Look at the water." Certain of Zaki's place back on deck, Nagala studied the rolling sea, noting how the trireme no longer produced a wake in the water. Thinking the Gamka moored on a sandbar whipped by the summer's many coastal storms, he searched and saw nothing. Only endless emptiness. Then he heard singing. Sometimes melodic death metal can best be described as dramatic, beautiful, and passionate in the fullest sense. I think that best describes this band from the Lazio region of Rome, Italy. This is Black Therapy with the title track from their 2016 album, In the Embrace of Sorrow, I Smile. A pretty decisive koala bear got a hold of me about a feature phone ringing off the hook in San Diego. This is Sunsail by Feature Phone, and may you find your way to your destination. What can be said about DARRYL the Seed Mansel that bards have not already sung? Of his wondrous knowledge when it comes to books, music, and movies? Of his expansive understanding of storytelling across multiple mediums, the successful founding of the Poprika Podcast Network, Cine-Men, a master of reviews galore. The next 90 minutes is a meeting of two friends who are both fans of what they love but also professionals in the fields that they work in. Basically, we talk massive shit, so enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to Pondering the Orb number 5. Of course, I have with me my guest. He is a member of the North Carolina Critics Association, the Southeast Film Critics Association. Is that the correct term?
Yep.
I mean, he is also the founder and editor-in-chief of Poprika Reviews. He is also the king of my peoples, the founder of Poprika Podcast and the Poprika Network. He is also a very dear friend of mine. I am very, very pleased to announce and bring to the show DARRYL the Seed Mansel. How are you doing tonight, sir?
How is it going out there, man? This is episode 5 of Pondering the Orb, and I've been having a blast so far watching these joints, man. So it's good to be on, man. It's good to be on.
Man, I'm so happy to have you. You've been such a big supporter since the beginning, and of course, Poprika has been such a huge source of support in my general career. And of course, we've been friends for a good long time now. Um, I brought you here to talk about pop culture, to wax poetic about some of the things that we care a lot about when it comes to celebrity and entertainment. The first thing I have to start with, though, really, what do you think about this kind of massive change that is happening at HBO in terms of scripted entertainment? And we're seeing a merger right now between Warner and Discovery. From what we've been told, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, but from what we've been told, HBO's programming will be folded into basically Discovery Plus. Now, they've kind of been a little murky on whether or not there will still be an HBO branded version of content versus Discovery Plus branded version of content. But essentially, these two kind of umbrellas of content will merge together. And out of this, we are going to see less original scripted HBO content with. Am I?
No, it's frustration is what's on my face right now.
Gotcha. So one of the things that we've already seen, Doom Patrol and Titans are on the chopping block. They have already withheld Batgirl, which I believe was a film that was going to be $90 million at least. And also had Michael Keaton showing up as Batman. So like this isn't just any film that's being withheld. What do you make of this kind of giant move by, I guess, the CEO of Warner Discovery in terms of dialing back on this content, withholding DC content, and then possibly chopping? I know there's kind of mixed reaction to Titans, but Doom Patrol is a very popular show, especially among fans. What's your general reaction to all this? I have to imagine for you it has to be very surprising, and like you said, frustrating.
It's both. It's frustrating and it's surprising. David Zaslav, the dude that's now calling shots out there, it's frustrating from a fan standpoint, and unfortunately, I kind of see it from the business standpoint. Like DC specifically had been horribly mismanaged, ran into the ground. They needed some kind of radical change to shake things up. And he has come out and blatantly said, I'm here to make money, which is what business is all about. And this is that crossroads that all creators find themselves at, that crossroads between art and commercialism. And he is there specifically for the commercialism of it. How do I make money off of this art? And something needed to happen. I just wish it wasn't this thing that happened. Of course, it's frustrating that Batgirl's been canceled. That it seems like there's a number of female and POC-led things that they decided to jettison first, which is kind of some sand in my craw. From a strictly fan standpoint, it sucks. From a business standpoint, I kind of understand you have to kind of out with the old, in with the new. But overall, it just sucks, man. It sucks. I mean, it's the moving forward with the Ezra Miller Flash, while
Mm-hmm.
canceling the Batgirl, a lot of people are up in arms. But when you sunk this much money into Flash, you kind of have to do something with it.
Wait a second. So, like, is it confirmed that they are moving forward with him? Because last I heard, they were like still weighing options.
So there's three options that's on the table. It's shelve it indefinitely, which we know they're not going to do because, again, too much money has already been sank. A lot more than 90 million has been sank into it.
Right.
I do believe recasting. Yeah, I think recasting Ezra was one of the options, or like releasing the movie. Recasting Ezra was an option, and I think the third option might have been just putting it out and riding with it. It seems like the sensible option to me would be to let it out and recast your Flash at the end of that movie. But we'll see what
So,
goes on.
so why isn't there any consideration of like Grant Gustin, or Grant Gustinson? I may fuck up his last name, but
That's
why isn't
Gustin.
there any why isn't there any consideration of casting him in this? Because at this point, I think we're 8 seasons in. He's very popular with a fan base. People would recognize him immediately. Why is there not even a look towards this? Is there just kind of a
They're
where does CW not even enter the conversation in all this for them?
I don't think so. I mean, that's what the fans seem to more or less want. Um,
Right,
we now know that the upcoming season of The Flash is the last season of The Flash. So it kind of opens up that door. If Grant Gustin ain't got nothing on the on his board coming up after the Flash, why not just have him move on over to TV and film? I think it is hands down, far and away, the smartest thing that they could do is give a guy who has had almost a decade with this character on
right.
a shoestring budget, which is what CW pretty much works with, and he's proven himself there. So it's time for him to graduate from being the AAA Flash up to the majors, and give that man the budget he deserves to do a Flash show. Now,
Absolutely.
part of that might just be, the success might be Greg Berlanti has created a universe. This is a man who seems to kind of understand these characters, so I'm not sure how well he would translate over. But it does seem to be what the fans are crying for. Just recast Ezra, put Grant Gustin in his place. And even as a person who's not a huge Flash fan, I'm all for that casting.
So, it seems like we're going to be focusing on DC and DC films a lot here at the beginning of the show, but I
Mm-hmm.
have so many questions to ask you around this. You know, with the with Greg Berlanti right there creating this kind of CW universe, and there's always this plethora of articles about how Warner Brothers is looking for their Kevin Feige, or
Mm-hmm.
the equivalent of Kevin Feige for the DC universe. You know, for a while Jeff Johns seemed to be there, and then he kind of got washed out along with Zack Snyder and um,
And Whedon.
God, I can't Whedon, Joss Whedon. Oh my God, he's been gone so long, I've already forgotten his name. Um,
A small piece of Joss Whedon just died right there.
Bye, Joss. Anyway, but why haven't they pulled the trigger on bringing Greg Berlanti into this? Because he's proven that he can shoot moderately good TV on a shoestring budget. He can produce a great looking Superman. Arrow was a huge cultural hit. Why is this not translating for Warner Brothers that they already have this guy kind of here? Or is he just not the guy, in your opinion? Or is there a general opinion that he's good where he is, but he wouldn't make the jump to film well?
I think that might be their hesitation because, again, if you keep your ear to the streets, a lot of people are asking the same question. Berlanti has proven himself on television. Why not give him a
Right.
shot at the quote unquote big leagues? And it might just be that they don't think he has the juice to really transition from television to big screen. Not everybody does. Um, I mean, it seems to work the other way around a lot. Well, I mean, look at
Mm-hmm.
J.J. Abrams. He made the transition from television to the big screen, but not everybody can. Um,
And it's
or it might
debatable
just be he
whether
doesn't want to
it's
do it. I don't know.
successful.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. It might
Yeah.
just be that Berlanti just doesn't want to do it. Maybe he's just comfortable where he is and he's happy in his playing in his little corner of the sandbox there. A lot of people are asking the question, just give Berlanti a shot. But as for why, who knows?
Do you think that there is a different level of judgment from fandom if, well, like, you brought up a really good point, jumping from TV to film. If he were to suddenly jump from like producing Flash on TV to suddenly having to produce Flash for a movie, in some ways the pressure really does amp up there. And I'm wondering how much confidence Warner Brothers has in general when it comes to producing these films, because it seems like unless it's Batman or the Joker, like it seems like there's this constant game of hot potato in terms of who's actually going to be responsible in making the decision of like putting these films out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, does does Warner Brothers write themselves in terms of like the DC extended universe in the near future, or are we going to keep kind of seeing chaos just kind of keep going the same way that we see in terms of Ezra Miller? You know, I want to ask you about bots when it comes to Justice League, especially the Snyder Cut.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where do you think Warner Brothers goes with the franchise here now from here on out? Because obviously Marvel with the MCU is the definite winner of this race. There's no race.
No, you don't say.
Yeah. But like, if you were let's say you were magically in charge of the DC universe tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
or you had your ear to the ground, where does this go from here?
I think they're part of the reason why we haven't heard any cancellation of Flashpoint is because that is their linchpin movie, and that's the movie that they use to wipe the slate clean and start from a fresh page. I think that's why they're holding on to it as desperately as they can. In order for things to move forward, this movie has to come out. Um,
Right.
so my answer would be dependent on the Flash movie and how the whole thing works out. If they use it to reset everything, a blank slate, and they give me a new Superman, a new Batman, I guess you can keep Wonder Woman, guess you can keep Aquaman, whatever. But if I came out of Flashpoint hype, then I would say the sky is the limit for them. The opportunity is there. It's just so many boneheaded mistakes have been along the way. The fan trust is not there.
Do you think that this is the overall goal, considering that it seems like they've brought Affleck back into the fold to play Bruce Wayne at least.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, do you think that the general goal is to probably have Michael Keaton, um, Ben Affleck, maybe even Robert Pattinson as part of a Flashpoint universe, or is Matt Reeves and Joker kind of off to its own thing, or are
I
they
think
still kind of are they
they're off
intertwined in
to
this as well?
they're off doing their own thing. Like I don't think you're gonna see Joaquin Phoenix's Joker popping up in Robert Pattinson's Batman, and let them be their
Right.
own thing. It's okay to have things outside of whatever it is your main continuity doing. I don't think the public really gives a fuck or cares if there are
Right.
two Batmen out there. Um, as far as
Yeah.
as far as Affleck and Keaton are concerned, I think Affleck is just fine popping up once in a while for a little Bruce Wayne moment. I don't think we'll ever get him fully back as the Batman. And Michael
Right.
Keaton has pretty much all but said, "Hey, this is a good paycheck for me." So as long as they
Yeah.
want to keep paying him to do it, then he'll keep showing up. But if he wants to transition from playing the old Bruce Wayne to the Thomas Wayne Batman like we see in Flashpoint, then that would be interesting. But it would be dependent on what you want to do with that character in that story. They are too dependent, much as same for DC Comics on Batman. Like I think they tend to forget that they have the generally considered one of the greatest superheroes of all time to ever exist in their stable
Yeah.
in Superman. But it just seems like for the times and these gritty times that we are in, Batman just seems to fit the mood of the world right now.
Well, transitioning to Superman real quick, there was a lot made of Henry Cavill showing up in Hall H during Comic Con, and of course he did not. What do you think the future is of Henry Cavill at DC as Superman, or do you think that we are probably going to have to wait for a recasting before we know about
Uh,
this?
Listen, it's been a decade. Next year makes a decade since Man of Steel, and that tells me everything that I need to know. I don't think we
Gotcha.
will see Henry Cavill back as Superman, and at this point, man, just he's got the Witcher franchise. He's good. Just let him go do his thing. He's still nerding it out in his nerd corner, so he still gets to do his nerd thing. It's just not comic books; it's fantasy. Um, so yeah, recast Superman, and then let's just get this train back up and running. It's been too long. As a person who hates Superman, I will openly say that it's been too long since we've had a Superman movie.
Right. Fully agree. So kind of transitioning away from DC and kind of touching on like your experience and your career right now as a critic, when you see kind of the entertainment industry make huge changes like this, and there are of course downturns in the economy that take place, shows get cut. How do you as a critic find yourself responding to times like these?
That's a good question. Um, for me as a critic, it doesn't really matter. I know that regardless, movies are still going to come out. Even in 2020, when all theaters were closed, there were still many and many and many movies that were coming out. It's just they weren't blockbusters. So when people say no movies came out, what they really mean is no big blockbusters came out. All the Oscar stuff
Correct.
still came out to streaming, or critics still got all that kind of stuff sent to their inboxes and whatnot. So movies are still going to come out. I think we are approaching the bubble bursting for big budget blockbuster movies, though, because people still aren't fully comfortable with going back to theaters. These movies aren't quite making the level of returns they want them to make, and that's going to force that cost budget to come down. It kind of happened like when the '90s action, we got to a point where it was just way over the top, and like I think like maybe the True Lies era is where people were like, "All right, it's time to
Yeah.
bring this back down," and that's when we got the 2000s like much more cheaper joints. Like Taken didn't cost a whole lot of money. Like The Raid didn't cost a whole lot of money, right? So I think that
Oh,
we
the
will
transporter
be
films.
approaching that level. What do you say?
Oh, the transporter films. For a while, we got a lot of foreign-made action films on the market that
Right.
were, not poorly made, but very cheaply produced. I mean, Jason Statham has an entire action career because of that.
Exactly. And speaking of Jason's, man, the Bourne joints didn't really cost a whole lot of money to make either. It's
No.
not a whole lot of like all the CGI is like small little things. Nothing like the
Right.
size of what we see now. I would not be surprised if we are approaching the end of studios just tossing gobs of money at things. But then again, man, I mean, Top Gun Maverick made a boatload of money, so what do I know?
So when you see something like Top Gun Maverick kind of show up after, decades and decades of the franchise essentially being in neutral, and it suddenly kicked up with this one movie that, I think that we can talk about kind of the internals of the movie and some of the political ramifications of what was presented in there, especially when it comes to our Hollywood's relationship with China.
Hmm.
Um, but when you see a movie like Top Gun Maverick kind of come up and be as successful as it is, what do you think that says about the viewing audience out there? And what do you think it says about it being so successful post COVID in terms of the theater going marketplace?
I think it means that there was a lot of people out there who were hungry for something that didn't have capes and tights, honestly.
Mm,
Because outside of that big blockbuster wise, the only thing you really had, like Transformers has been dead for the last couple of years. The only thing you really had was Fast and Furious.
thank
And
God.
so I think people were hungry for something new. It wasn't something original, it's a sequel, but they wanted something that just wasn't a giant third act CGI fest. Um, And I think they really responded to that. And it's the fact that it's a movie that's 30 years in the making, but it doesn't lean heavy into this nostalgia. Like they show it, they put a spotlight on it, but they don't lean into it. It's not a crutch. It's
Right.
more of a supplement than anything else, and more of an amplifier to the movie. It still stands on its own. Like if Top Gun Maverick was made with no Top Gun made, it would still be a dope movie, I think. And a
Right.
lot of practical effects as well. It makes the movie just feel a little bit more real. I think people were kind of hungry for that kind of theater going experience.
Well, so my wife and I have really big debates about watching Tom Cruise movies because of Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to watch a cut of Top Gun Maverick one night, and it is visually one of the most arresting films of the last 10 years. Like, one thing that you can say about Tom Cruise and his production capabilities, he puts out some of the most stunning work, and probably has some of the best cinematographers working for him in the game. But just his ability to conceive, I want to be Maverick again, and I want to do this, and I'm actually going to fly these fucking planes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that there's an authenticity to that kind of level of filmmaking that is very hard to pull off. And maybe that film is, there was a lot made of like, is Tom Cruise kind of a bygone era, and is this kind of his last hurrah? And you made the point earlier, we're getting to the point of big budget films, you know, maybe kind of going to the wayside a little bit again.
Mm-hmm.
Is Top Gun uh, a continuance of kind of big budget films? Like, do studios look at that and go like, "Hey, people still want this," or do you think that this is kind of like the True Lies um, tipping point, as you mentioned earlier?
I don't think we're there yet. I think Tom
Okay.
Cruise's last big hurrah will be the next year's Mission Impossible movie. That might be our true lies. As
Oh,
far
you don't think
as
it's going to
like,
be Heat 2? You don't think it's going to be Heat 2? You don't think
which I
that's
do
going to
need
be
to
the
go to the
eighth?
store to pick up that book.
Yeah.
I really think that that Mission Impossible might be, if not like the bubble burster, because MCU's still out there doing it. It's if not the bubble burster, it's just going to be the last hurrah of Tom Cruise in action. Which that in and of itself, if I were smart, and if that is the plan, that's exactly how the hell I market it, and that's what gets
Yeah.
people in seats. But that movie's going to make all the money, and if the bubble is close to bursting, studios aren't going to recognize that for another couple of years, which means you got to have a year or two of some big flops out there before that starts to come down, before the studios learn their lesson. So, yeah, I mean, Maverick, it made its money. It's the only movie I think that Cruise has ever done that's made $1 billion. So good for him. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that success rolls into this last Mission Impossible movie, and then let that be the beginning of scaling things back down.
Right. So, one thing that was made about the presentation of the content within Top Gun Maverick was that it's the first time that China wasn't the content wasn't necessarily hands off with China. China wasn't necessarily named like the outright enemy or agitator, but there was a very clear indication that they were not seen as necessarily the good guys, even though they do
Mhm.
show up in some of Tom Cruise's insignias on his uniform.
Mhm.
Where do you think the relationship is between China and Hollywood right now as it comes into like their production of movies and how we react to them and they react to us? Because I recently watched the original all 9 Star Wars films, and I
Right,
was
right.
kind of doing some research in terms of just how the reaction to them was. And like, you mentioned how Transformers is dead. Transformers was gigantically huge in China, but Star Wars can't get over there at all. So
Yeah.
what is our relationship with China now, especially post COVID, when it comes to filmmaking?
It's weird. The whole thing is weird because, again, it's that crossroads of art and commercialization. Like, you want to tell a story um, without any hindrances, but then you have a government saying, well, our billion aren't going to see that movie. And a
Yeah.
billion's a big old number. And
Yes, it
that means
is.
a whole lot of money you're missing out on. So it's, do you want to sacrifice a whole lot? We're talking millions of dollars that you are losing if you want to include these LGBTQ characters, if you want to include
Right.
the more like supernatural sorcery stuff that China traditionally does not like to fuck with,
Right.
with their storytelling elements. So it's, you gotta, right now I think Hollywood is still kind of picking and choosing their battles. Like I think they lost out on Doctor Strange because America Chavez is traditionally, lesbian, and even
Right.
though Disney kind of skimps on presenting that fact outside of a little lesbian pin on her jacket,
Oh, we're gonna
and
get
her
into
having
all of this.
and having two mothers, the China, that was enough for China to be like, no, we're not going to have this in our theaters. So
Right.
it comes at times of fighting your battles. Do you stand up for your morals, or do you want that money? And it seems like Disney is at sometimes okay with going like, all right, we don't need your money because we know we'll still make this money here in the United States. Whereas I'm sure there's other companies that are like, X that out so we can get that China money.
I find it very interesting when it comes to China, especially with Tom Cruise, because like his production is I think tied in directly into like Chinese investment. So the division between him and presenting that kind of film and the kind of line he has to walk, and I guess what a lot of producers have to walk now when it comes to working with China, I think has to be very fraught, especially post COVID, because there's no guarantee that the actual Chinese populace will actually be able to show up and be in the theaters to see those movies either, because China has this kind of COVID zero policy that, they'll lock down an entire city and close businesses.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to Hollywood and COVID in general, how do you think the theater going experience has changed? How do you think the general movie consumption experience has changed?
As far as COVID is concerned,
Well, post COVID, because
post
COVID came
COVID,
along
yeah,
and like kind of ended us going to theaters for a little bit. And as you said, people still haven't returned into returned at the numbers yet that it was pre-pandemic.
yeah.
What do you think
Uh,
has really changed in terms of how we appreciate and consume not only just cinema but television and stuff like that?
I'll tell you what's fucking changed. What's changed is people got way too comfortable watching movies at home, and they brought that comfortability with them back to the theaters. That's what's
Ah,
changed. A whole lot of people are a whole lot more mouthier and talkier in movies because they forgot they're not sitting on their couches at home anymore.
right.
I think we need to get back to a little more civility in our theaters, but that's
A
neither
little
here
bit
nor
more of a
there.
formal experience.
A bit more of a formal experience, man. I mean, you should know when the lights go down, just turn your phone off and shut up. It's the two easiest things there is to do. As far as outside of that, like obviously people are far more reticent to go to the theaters, though you do have people on the other end of that scale that hungered for the return of the theatrical experience. So they're seeing everything that they possibly can. One of those far outweighs the other. But as far as movie and TV consumption, man, it's, I don't know if it changed habits per se. I feel like your average American probably saw five, maybe six movies in the theater. Because
Hmm.
theater experience isn't cheap, especially if you've got a family. So you, again, it's about
Right.
picking and choosing battles. You gotta, all right, we can get this Pixar movie in for the kid, maybe one or two date night movies. We might get a blockbuster, or maybe a little cheap matinee in there. So for those people, I don't think much has changed. Um,
Right.
for the people who are a little bit more hungry for the theatrical experience but still need to be health conscious, I think they're still hesitant about really diving back into, and a lot of people like to argue, oh, I have a 65-inch screen television at home and I have good surround sound. I don't need to go to the theater, which that's nice. A 65-inch television is not a 40-foot theater, however, and your surround sound is not what Dolby has installed for Top Gun Maverick,
Right.
unless you want to blow your shit out in one movie. But
Yeah.
it's all in what you want to get out of the movie, I suppose.
So HBO recently announced that they're no longer going to be releasing films that have been released in theaters 45 days after premiere. I think it
Hmm.
was 45 days, correct? I might be wrong with that. But how do you think it was pretty revolutionary when HBO Go came out and said, like, stuff that shows up in theaters is going to show up 45 days after? Taking that away, I think, is kind of exiting out a certain percentage of the market that was really looking forward to that. Do you think that that era is over, or do you think HBO is going to ever go back to that model? Because I
No,
think post pandemic, there really was something there that people liked, but you think it's dead.
I think it's dead, man. But in 2020, it made sense. The things that was that 20 or was that 21? 21, when people
Yeah,
were
21.
still when it was hitting theaters and HBO Max at the same time. That was
Right.
revolutionary. That was something new we hadn't seen. And then they kind of got away from that, and they had the 45-day theatrical window, which people weren't going to the theaters as much, but it still incentivized them to keep that HBO Max subscription or HBO Go. Now that they don't have that, I understand that they want to squeeze every penny out of their theatrical releases they can, because it's a give and take, right? Like, if you have the option to watch it in the theater or watch it at home, like, I don't need to watch an Oscar nominated movie in the big theater. I can watch that in the
Right.
comfort of my own home. The Suicide Squad is something that I want to see in theater. So it's, do you want the subscription money or do you want that theatrical cut? It all depends on what that business model is.
So I have to ask you, we've been friends for such a long time. I was friends with you before you were a professionally recognized, lauded film critic.
Lauded.
Um, hey, inside here, you're lauded to me. Inside here,
Much appreciated.
but now that you've actually been able to get like films sent to you, and you get to see stuff sometimes beforehand, judging these Oscar films versus the big budget films, it seems to me that a lot of the industry around Oscar movies was actually built off of sending these films to critics anyway and having the critics watch them beforehand. How do you think the Oscar selection process and and Oscar films in general have changed now that the pandemic really has changed the theater going experience? Do you think that Oscar films are something that are more relegated to critics, or is that something that is still popularly consumed by a general audience?
I think the Oscar bait movies haven't been popular with the general audience in years. The general audience loves to go to the theater and have a fun time. They want to throw
Right.
popcorn in their face. They want to see some explosions. They want some quippy one-liners. They want some action, and then they go about their day. That's your general theater going audience. But as far as people who really dig the Oscar stuff, I don't think pandemic times changed a whole lot about the Oscar process. Obviously, it changed how movies are shot and made, but for the most
Right.
part, most of your Oscar bait movies are small, dramatic affairs that you don't need to go to the theater for in the first place. I prefer to watch Oscar contenders in the comfort of my own home, because I
Right.
feel like that's a better viewing experience for me, where I can rewind something, or something is like, oh, wait a minute, that plot point doesn't. Let me go back and see. Like, I don't feel the need to go to theaters for the majority of my Oscar, unless it's like West Side Story, which is all about vibrancy and looked good on big
Right.
screen. But the only thing that's really changed Oscars wise is the people who are now able to vote, instead of bringing in younger people and people of different
Hmm.
demographics. Hopefully, that will kind of shift what movies get nominated and what movies win. But as far as how things have been done since pandemic time, not a lot has changed. Critics were already getting all their Oscar stuff sent to them at home beforehand, before all this went down, anyways. It's just the
Right.
amount of shit that got sent to them went up.
Gotcha. So, like, in terms of how you've mentioned that we are probably at a point where big budget films will hit a bubble, or the bubble will pop and things will change for a little bit. I want to hit you with a question. And I just want to get your general reaction because I think it's connected to all this.
Mm-hmm.
But I've read a lot of articles that have made this statement: streaming wars are over. If so, who won and who lost?
See, that's the thing about it. The streaming wars were over, and then
Yeah,
HBO Max fucked themselves. I think
right,
HBO Max definitely was on the winning end. They had the day and date going on, and they had the 45-day window going on. They had some decent anime. They had Criterion movies. They had Turner Classic
right,
Movies on there. There was something for everyone. And since some people don't want to shell out money for the Criterion streaming service, or some people don't want to shell out, I think TCM has its own streaming service. If you don't want either one of those, you can get them both on HBO Max.
right.
And now HBO Max is getting a bunch of A24 movies, so they might kind of raise their stock up a little bit. But, they're doing away with a bunch of movies on HBO Max. They're not going to be doing as much scripted stuff. So while they are still great, I don't know if they're still top of the heap. Netflix is bleeding customers right now just due to all sorts of boneheaded decision making over there. So who's on top of the pile? If it's not HBO Max, I mean, the report came out earlier this week that Netflix still
Yeah,
barely has
I
the
was about
most
to ask you
subscribers.
that.
Yeah, but Disney
They
Plus is
barely have the
creeping up
most
on their ass.
subscribers, and they still made a profit this past quarter. Like they're still making money somehow.
Yeah, they're still making money somehow. Nobody knows the Netflix books. Nobody knows who actually views what in Netflix. It's the most pay no attention to the man behind the curtain that's going on over on Netflix numbers. But they somehow come up with the money to do things. So as long as they do that, then keep pumping out the content. Their problem is they're
So
just crappy at advertising their movies.
right. So we've been hitting on HBO a lot. Let's move over to Netflix real quick. What do you think has been? And it's funny. My wife and I are watching Virgin River, which is the new like romance joint that Netflix has up there. That's like blowing up for them. But
Mm-hmm.
what do you think has caused the mass exodus of subscribers from Netflix, and what do you think has caused kind of it to fall from the place that it clearly was at the top, where HBO was an obvious contender? I'm curious to see where you think Prime fits in all of this later on, but what do you think happened with Netflix?
Uh, Two things: price hike and the fact that they lost a lot of old content. Like Netflix had The Office for the longest, and that was so many white people's comfort show. They
Right.
love to just sit down and put on an episode of any episode of The Office. And that was the thing
Thank you for
when
saying that out loud. Only white people watch that. Oh, it's the whites.
it's this is a white
It's
thing.
that and Scrubs. It's our comfort stuff.
Hey, listen, Scrubs is a very good comfort show.
It
Um,
is.
but I think they might have had Community as well, and then they both lost those to I think Peacock when Peacock started their streaming service, and they went basically back home to their original programming. I think
Oh,
a
all
lot
the
of people,
Paramount stuff.
well, all the Paramount stuff, somehow they still got a couple of things on there, but I think it was the price hike and the lack of the comfort options that were given to them, and the fact that they tend to cancel a lot of fairly well received things. That would be a third thing. Like, oh, this shit was kind of dope, and it's canceled next week. Like the decision making process on what to keep, what to cancel. I told my sister earlier today because I was over at the parents' place and they had Netflix up, and we saw an ad for season 4 of something, and I was like, I've never even heard of this show. So
Hmm.
it's like they're keeping multiple seasons of stuff. Now I am not the end all be all. I'm sure that whatever that thing was, it has many fans, but it seems like the a lot of the big things that would hit and take root just don't get that chance. Like Sense8 kind of came and went real quick.
Right.
Well, I think we're very lucky Stranger Things got to stick around for as long as it did, but it's just a crapshoot of questionable decision making and not giving some things the time they need to breathe.
How long do you think something like The Witcher lasts at a place like HBO when it's bleeding subscribers? Do you think like Witcher's just locked in to be Witcher and what Witcher's going to be, or do you think we're actually going to see like real big production changes to how the show's produced and even how the show looks?
So I've been wondering. We only get one more Stranger Things. I think
Yeah,
Stranger Things is the flagship of Netflix. It was Orange is the New Black because that was like their first original TV series, if I remember correctly. And
yeah.
then that went off. There's like maybe a year or two gap, and then Stranger
Witcher
Things.
was there for a while. Witcher was the number one show on Netflix,
Yeah,
like for a little bit.
when there was no Stranger Things.
Exactly, and then season 4 hit, and
Yeah, and then it went back to the top. But now that Stranger Things is about to be gone, like what is going to be the big thing? Is it The Witcher? I think that is their best bet. If I'm
yeah,
Netflix, I put my chips on the bag of The Witcher and I shoot up that production budget, make sure that it looks all nice and shiny, and
right.
especially when we got Lord of the Rings that's coming out later on this year, like you're gonna need to have some kind of contender to that thing. Witcher is their best option. I think that should be their new flagship joint after Stranger Things is done.
Where do you think Wheel of Time? So it's funny because no, 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 no. Okay, okay. Time out. Time out. Let's hear me out.
Hmm.
So like as a fan, we're both big fantasy fans. We're both big epic fantasy fans. So
Hmm.
right now, as a fan, this is kind of a great time to be alive.
Oh
We
yeah.
have a new Lord of the Rings coming out. The Witcher's here. Despite what people can say critically about Wheel of Time, it did find an audience and it's still going to have a second season. Like
Hmm.
Amazon's going forward with it. Now, whether or not it has kind of a stripped down production because the production wasn't that great to begin with, um, that remains to be seen. But do you think big budget fantasy kind of survives the pop that we see in terms of action movies, or do you think everything is going to kind of be decelerated down eventually? And
Good
we'll jump kind of
question.
back to Disney for this because I think
Yeah,
Marvel is a unique question in all
it is.
this.
It really is. I think, well, you're 100% correct. As fantasy fans, we've been eating quite nicely since Game of Thrones hit the market and
Yes.
kind of, for lack of a better phrase, put some respectability on fantasy's name. While Lord of the Rings is obviously, the unfilmable masterpiece that it ended up being. Game of Thrones
Yeah.
kind of gave us something that's a lot more adult oriented, and then people realize that there is a bit of a market for this. And you can kind of have it both ways if you want it. And we've just had a bit of a glut. Some hasn't worked, like was it the Shannara Chronicles didn't really work all that well, and some other stuff. I think we are about to be done with big budget fantasy as well,
Hmm.
or we will see it in a different way. I think there's all sorts of like medievalish type shows that were
Hmm.
Game of Thrones influenced and inspired. Netflix has a lot of these that came out that they've kind of found their
Right.
lane and stuck in there as well. Like The Last Kingdom, I think, is one of those shows. A couple of other things in there as well.
Hugely
But
popular
it's
among fantasy fans. Yeah.
huge. Yeah, I watched the first season there. I really liked it. And I just never got back to it. But I think fantasy as the era that we are in now won't be around much longer unless Lord of the Rings just blows everybody away again. It looks pretty, but I don't know if the story is going to be there. I don't know if that's going to bring people in. If so, maybe.
I'm
And people will not discredit the name Carnival Row. Damn it! I loved the first season of Carnival Row. It's only
right.
been 9 decades since the first season, so
Yeah.
there's still the possibility that Prime can, if Wheel of Time doesn't work for them, Carnival Row season 2 could work for them.
So when I think Prime is in a very interesting spot, especially when it comes to the Lord of the Rings show Rings of Power.
Hmm.
There's so much money tied up into this one franchise and this one product that I think we're only going to get 10 episodes of.
Hmm.
What kind of return do they need? Like we're definitely going to get a season 2. They've already said they're going to do a season 2. But like what kind of return do you think that they need for this to be a justifiable thing? Because to
I mean,
me, just doing the math in my head, I don't see how they really make money off of this, even in terms of like gaining new subscribers. It feels like all the subscribers that can be subscribed to out there in the
Or
marketplace.
subscribe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like
Yeah.
we've kind of flooded. We've mined all the subscribers there are out there. Like, what is the real expectation of this?
I think the expectation for on Amazon's side, I don't think you're going to get any new subscribers. Like, I haven't seen a single person out in the streets, and I'm on Twitter all day, every day. I haven't
Yeah,
seen a single person out there that's like, boy, let me go get my Prime subscription for Rings of Power. It's people who already have Prime subscriptions that are like, I can't wait to see this show. And I
absolutely.
don't. It's not like Max. When Max had like Zack Snyder's Justice League come out, and they got a fairly decent number of people subscribed to HBO Max to watch this, and they just kind of quietly hope that those people forgot, and then they just kept auto renewing, and that's how they get you, right? I don't. I think that they are striving less for subscribers and more for actually possibly making a good product. Because it's Amazon. They have all of the money in the world already.
Right.
So I kind of think they just kind of want to just make a dope show. And if that's the case, again, like something I keep coming back to, it's that crossroads with art and commercialization. If there's any money, if there's any company that doesn't give a fuck about money, it's the two companies that already have money. It's Amazon and Tesla. They're good to go. They can take a L on this and just make a dope product.
So between you and I, two diehard fantasy fans,
Mm-hmm.
do you arguably the first three LOTR films, especially the extended versions, are like the Star Wars for a certain generation of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I found during the trailer for San Diego Comic-Con that there was very much this kind of presentation that like this is a Star Wars like community. Like we have a culture here. You can dress up as an elf, people can dress up as men and dwarves and do all that. And you can go to a theater or you can go hang out with your friends and you're all dressed up as Lord of the Rings. And it had a very Star Wars feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that this show has kind of an expectation behind it that it's going to explode into something bigger? Or do you think that like the fan base for this is already there? Like it's not going to get bigger than it is.
Listen, it's Lord of the fucking Rings.
Right.
It's one of like your hallowed sacred book series, right? Like I know of your love of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings.
It's fucking
Like
holding up this orb right here.
like you got your own little Palantir right there. Like
Yeah.
it's I don't see like a new generation of people that are like, we got to go check out this Rings of Power thing. That new generation, their parents just showed them Lord of the Rings, so they're already fans. I don't see this growing a whole new Lord of the Rings community when it is, as far as fans is concerned, probably the biggest community that there is and has been for decades, and most likely will always be the biggest as in our lifetimes, anyways. Like Game of Thrones is huge. The cat's been Lord of the Rings for fucking years and decades.
Right.
I don't see them expanding their sphere of influence all that much. All that to
So,
say, who's this for? Outside of like fans of Lord of the Rings, I I don't know who this is for. I don't think this is going to bring you a whole lot of new eyes. It's just going to be something for us.
well, I asked that to transition to the question about Marvel. So, I believe we're close to the end of the phase. They
Mm-hmm.
announced essentially the next three phases, um, or at least the next two, from what I can recall. But they
Yeah.
announced the next two phases and kind of the slate of movies that's going to come out. It seems now, in terms of the MCU, we're going to be getting a mix of high budget movies along with some relatively high budget long series formatted shows, or mini series, kind of in the
Mm-hmm.
nature of Loki, or in case of Star Wars like Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the future of Marvel and the MCU is at this point? Because this is an institution now. It's as much like Star Wars as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is generationally defining, and it just keeps going. There's going to be new movies, there's going to be new content. do the wheels ever fall off of this thing at this point, or are we
I
just kind of in this kind of, is this just another Disney kind of cultural thing that we're always going to have, like princesses and Mickey
no,
Mouse?
I
Okay.
think the wheels eventually fall off. I think
Eventually.
eventually, I think they'll still be trying to pump out movies after the comic book movie bubble has burst. I think they're going to try to just ride it out till the last possible cent is wringed out of it, unfortunately, rather than like Seinfelding it and going out after Endgame or going out even after Secret Wars, which kind of makes sense. But even then, as far as we know for right now, they still wouldn't have fully brought X-Men on board. So unless their like masterstroke is to just tell all their Avengers stories, and when they think they're done, they're going to come back and start telling us all the X-Men stories, then they can continue to try and make some money off of that. But I think regardless, they're just going to drag it, pummel it into the ground. And I'm on record as saying that I would be quite all right just hopping off the MCU after Secret Wars is all said and done.
Really? Okay. So for me, I'm going back and trying to catch up on the recent phases. I hopped off at the end of Infinity Saga just because I
Mm-hmm.
thought like, okay, this is a good place to
Great
stop.
stopping point.
I we've literally put decades into this at this point. You got my money, I got my entertainment. Let's just move on. um, but at this point, it really seems like there's either going to have to come to a resting point, which there's this kind of multiverse. Not a, I forget what the show's called. I can't remember the title. Multiverse something, but like multiverse mayhem or something like
We
that.
got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, that's the recent film. But I remember there
Mm-hmm.
was a multiverse title that they brought out during the slate at Comic Con, and it had
We
like a
got
multiverse.
we got
Sorry,
Secret
go
Wars
on.
coming. We got Kang Dynasty coming. We got Quantumania coming.
Quantum
Uh,
Mania, that's it.
yeah,
I think Quantum Mania is probably where they introduce X-Men. I mean, they've already introduced Xavier, but I think that's probably where they're going to kick that off
I would
because
not be.
I don't see the last four Avengers films being the place where they start bringing in X-Men at
They
this
got to
point.
bring him in somewhere, and I feel like it's gonna be something we don't see coming. Like they're gonna show up in some place where we're like, what the fuck? How'd they sneak? But somehow they Miss Marvel. They finally gave us a term in the last episode, mutant. And they played
Right.
that little da-da-da-da-da-da at the right when they said
Yeah.
that little 94 stinger. I don't know if Quantum Mania is where you do it because you already got Kang that you got to introduce and set up. Um, whatever the actual plot of the movie is, you got to do that. Like you can't overstuff your shit to where it's just too many plot points and not enough respect paid to all of them. But if they try to sneak something in, I wouldn't be surprised if they do it there. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they hold off to something we just don't see, like Guardians, like the
Yeah.
Shi'ar Empire pop up or something like that. But who knows?
I've been waiting so long for the Shi'ar Empire to pop up in Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm surprised that they didn't drop that hint earlier. Um, Especially with the recent Thor film, which by the way, great movie. Love and Thunder was a very good film.
Mhm.
Uh what do you think happens with these kind of good films though? Because like, Chris Hemsworth is not going to be Thor forever. At some point
Mhm.
even Anthony Mackie is not going to be Cap anymore. Um how do you keep this going in terms of star power? Or do you think that at some point Marvel's going to start transitioning away from having big stars and trying to create their own?
I think it's not star power. It's leaning on the property that you have. Like, yeah, we
Okay.
don't have an Iron Man anymore, but we know that the girl who essentially stole the blueprints for Iron Man's tech, Riri Williams, Ironheart, is going to be in Wakanda forever. So it's
Right.
not about leaning on your stars, it's about leaning on your property. And if you have writers who can continue to make good movies with relatable characters, yeah, your biggest guns might not be there, but if you have an invested audience, they'll keep on with those. Remember, they started with C tier characters because the Avengers they weren't the shit back in
Right.
the early 2000s. So if they can continue on with that, then even without your big properties there, you can still entice people to come back to the audiences if the writers and showrunners have done a good job.
One last question about Marvel, and then I kind of want to touch on the issue of diversity in entertainment as it stands. But how long do you think that for the foreseeable future, and maybe for a good long while, we'll keep having live action productions from Marvel or the MCU, or do you think that, like you said, it goes away eventually? But do you think live action Marvel goes away, or we're always going to have something?
I think we're going to see, as far as television is concerned, we're going to see live action Marvel for quite some time because it's a smart way to build out the world without shelling out the blockbuster sized budget to just fill in these little nooks and crannies and give some of these smaller C tier characters, for lack of a better phrase, tryouts. Like if you put a little 8 episode something together, and the audiences really respond to that, you know that you can transition that character, put them into big films.
Right.
So they kind of use the television shows the farm team for the big movies. And if you want to dovetail right on into diversity and inclusion, I think a lot of that in the MCU is happening on the Disney show side
Right.
where we're getting, that's where we got our first look at the Black Captain America. That's where we get, Echo, that TV show coming out next year with a Native American deaf woman. We're getting She-Hulk, we're getting more females all up throughout that, like the Kate Bishop Hawkeye, who featured prominently in the Hawkeye series. So I think they're using that to kind of prop up a lot of stuff that they weren't. They're racing to play catch up. Basically, is what they're
Right.
doing. They had Ike Perlmutter, who is infamous for saying, no women, no people of color, they can't headline shows because they don't draw money. And that hamstrung Feige for the longest. So when they finally got rid of Perlmutter, Black Panther comes out, billion. Captain Marvel comes out, billion. So
Yeah.
now, after a decade of not being able to really include the women and the people of color that they want to, they're kind of just giving it all to us in one big heap, racing to catch up and populate this world with a more diversified cast because that's what the world is fucking made of. And a lot of that
Absolutely.
starts at the Disney Plus level and then graduates up to the movie. So we're going to have those for a while.
So, how do you think the making the industry, especially in terms of the content produced, making it more diverse, but also making it more inclusive, how do you think things are going, especially after the pandemic? Do you think things have gotten better? Do you think things are getting worse? With the decline of scripted content in HBO and
Mm-hmm.
the Batgirl movie, which starred a black actress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where do you think things are right now in terms of, Jordan Peele just came out with Nope, which was again hugely successful. It's also one of the most mind-bending films, with the exception of the Michelle Yeoh movie.
Everything
Everything,
Everywhere All at Once.
yeah, with the exception of that film, Nope is probably the best just visual film that I've seen in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where do you think things are? Where do you think things going? Are things good or are things bad?
I don't think things are bad. I think things
Okay.
are better than they were before. I also think
Mm-hmm.
there's still a long way to go before people are fully represented and realized in this world. For the years, it was just straight white guy stories, straight white woman stories. And
Right.
it took a long time for women to just get their voices heard, right? They finally kind of cleared that hurdle. And now we are seeing more and more African American people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, in leading and at least supporting roles and not just background. We're starting to see some more Hispanics, a couple of more Asians, crazy rich Asians went a long way to Asian representation in movies. But now, as we are still trying to catch that up, well, now we have the LGBT community, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not being represented. So it's like we are kind of crossing one hurdle, but then we look back and we've left all these people behind as well. So it's all about progress. I think we have not the first ever, but the first like big budget and promoted like gay rom com between two dudes, which that's massive. It's great to
Right.
see, the beginnings of stuff like that. So now it's just let's just get more types of stories out there. I think people don't realize that the more diversity we get, not just on screen, but in the writers' rooms,
Yes.
then with everyone bringing their unique world perspectives, the better overall stories you'll get. So we're doing better, but we still got quite a ways to go.
Do you think the industry has gotten better, especially on the independent level, for young creators of color or of diverse authenticities or origins? Do you think like there's more opportunity now, or do you think there's still do you still see barriers being put up in terms of like finding the next Ryan Coogler or finding the next great director, the next great Michael B. Jordan, or finding the next great actress in Kiki Palmer? Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that those avenues are wider than they were before, or do you still think that there's a lot of improvement to be done? Because I think people hear things like, for example, it was a big deal when Tyler Perry built his essentially production campus down in Atlanta. Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge deal to have
Yeah.
that. But I think a lot of people take these things and see them as like these huge stepping stones and think like, oh, we're there, we did it, racism over. um where do you still think like things need to be improved, and where do you think things have legitimately gotten better?
I think, like, just to speak to your point of Tyler Perry, like one dude was able to create an empire, and everyone celebrated one dude making it, and that lets
Right.
you know just how bad the disparity is. Like, if
Right.
there was like 45 black dudes every year just making dope, bomb, huge empires, it would just be another Tuesday. But just one guy. No, I think the opportunities are there, if for no other reason than the ability to make movies is the cheapest it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are making
Absolutely.
movies on iPhones these days. Steven Soderbergh, noted director, the motherfucker that made Ocean's 11, has made, I think, three? I know at least two movies on iPhones. Like, entire production was made on an iPhone, which is crazy, or at least shot on an iPhone. I don't know if it was edited on the phone. Now
Yeah.
that those kind of opportunities exist, and now that the camera rigs for iPhones are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and just cameras, digital cameras in general, there's millions of YouTube channels on how to shoot and edit and make your own movies. So the opportunities for people to just get out there and tell stories is
Mm-hmm.
more than there's ever been. Um, Now, people willing to actually watch and listen to the stories being told, it's a bit of a different story. Yeah, blacklist the scripts that people enter for competitions that get made into movies. There's that avenue as well. Film schools are becoming more and more prevalent, so there's more opportunities for not just people of color, but everybody to make movies, which
Right.
might dilute the pool for people of color.
Yeah.
So it is a gift and a curse, but there is seemingly a focus more specifically on African Americans to get their voices out there and heard, when really it should be people of color, because Hispanics and Asians are out there making dope shit too. They need to be
Mm-hmm.
recognized as well. Indigenous people as well. And so it's it's weird, man. It's just weird seeing where the industry is at right now. Like I said, there's more than enough opportunities out there, but it takes executives at higher levels to give the yay or nay on whether or not I trust this person to give them millions of dollars to make their next story for our joint. And some people just don't make it past the indie level, unfortunately. And then sometimes just that one rarely breaks through. It's kind of hard to call Peele an indie filmmaker. We'd seen him on our television
Right.
screens for years already. Like, yeah, it's his Get Out was his first movie, but that's after how many seasons of Key and Peele, right? So he had an easier path than your normal person would.
I think the only I may take a risk in saying this, but one of my favorite comedians is Bobby Lee, who went up with Peele during the Mad TV days.
Yeah.
When I think Peele was a writer there, and he was one of the better writers of that show. But one of the things he said is that everyone was shocked at how good Get Out was, and no one expected him to make a film that good. I think people were expecting him to make comedy films and just be stuck making like good comedy films. But the amount of talent, I think one thing that happens in this industry is that there's a level of tokenism that doesn't get addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And, one person gets really successful. And, it's like you said with the Tyler Perry situation. Someone gets so successful and we just celebrate that one person. But there are so many young script writers, there's so many young directors, there's so many young actors and actresses, there's so many young production people from all over the world, from every community, all across, not only this nation, but every part of the globe. The assumption that somehow, like, he couldn't make something that was Oscar worthy or something that could actually change the culture, which I would argue he's done with like at least two different movies now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I think one thing that's a real big barrier, because I see this in publishing too, we have to just assume that there's a lot more talented people out there that have the ability to go out there and make these kind of groundbreaking things. And I think and I think it's somewhat of a confidence issue that's pervasive throughout. Creatives in general are just one. Okay, okay, everyone. So we had some technical difficulties. We're back. We were talking about diversity and inclusion, how there needs to be more opportunity, but because of the technical issues that we have, we're going to kind of move a little bit to a lightning round portion. Um,
It wasn't
this is
technical
just
issues. It was the man
it
guy.
was that Laszlo guy. He doesn't like us talking about HBO Go and his plans for Discovery.
He's like, people will stop talking shit about my plans.
God damn it. He's like, you're not going to Vince McMahon me, all of you. Oh, isn't that some shit, Vince McMahon being taken down the way he was?
I mean, taken down by his own actions, man.
No, I am just so shocked that you can spend $19 million and like for years no one goes like, hey, where's all this money going for whores? All this money for whores.
If someone wasn't, some bean counter wasn't bouncing or cooking the books like it should have, somebody caught on, man.
Exactly. So
you hate to see it, man. Real life villain.
So, lightning round.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the better film? Robert Pattinson's Batman, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker.
Oh, I don't like the Joker, so Batman.
Okay. Mandalorian or Andor?
That Andor trailer was fire, flames, fish grease. I'm gonna go with Mando just because I already know what I've got in Mando. Andor still got to prove a little bit, but I'm going Mando. Mando.
Okay. Pick one of the two and give me why.
Mm-hmm.
Rings of Power or House of the Dragon?
Oh, Rings of Power, because I am on a no thrones boycott until I get a Winds of Winter.
Okay, when do you actually think we're going to get a Winds of Winter?
George said
when's that garden going to grow? George, when's that garden going to grow?
He said in the blog yesterday that he's about to be fully done on 2 chapters. And so I think we are We are, which is the most we've ever gotten as far as a kind of like I'm getting towards the end of this.
Isn't
So
the shit already over 1 million words? Like
I don't
last
think
time
so.
you don't
Are you
think
talking
it's
about
that
like
big?
this series itself or Winds of Winter?
I heard something crazy a couple years ago that the draft had gotten over like something crazy and it was a ridiculously big book and they were going to have to think about chopping that one up too.
They said that it is getting what he had planned for manuscript page wise. It was gonna be a thick bitch.
Yeah.
But what
Tick, we like them tick.
what I can dig tick. I know George likes to write and rewrite a lot, so I think a lot of the words he's pumping out are not words on top of words, is words over words. So it's not quite as big as people are going to think it is. But him saying that I'm about all wrapped up on 2 POVs in this book, at least, I think that is the dimmest light at the end of the furthest tunnel. But it's something. But yes, on the Thrones boycott, so therefore I will give it to Rings of Power. And also, man, they spent a whole lot of money, and Rings of Power sure looks pretty. And I'm a sucker for cinematography.
Okay. Who do you think is the best cinematographer in the game right now?
Roger Deakins. That man gave us Blade Runner 2049, which is a beautiful visual masterpiece. And then after that, he gave us 1917, which is, for me, man, one of the best recent war movies to come out. Deakins is he's delicious behind the camera.
Okay. 1917 and Saving Private Ryan.
I'm gonna. Whew.
It's a hard one because you're right. Like 1917 really is one of the most gorgeous films, bar none, you'll ever see. But Saving Private Ryan is an experience. Like
I think technically 1917 is a better technical movie. I think Saving Private Ryan is better character development. Like you get to know and love the guys of this troop. So yeah, I mean, plus that opening act of Saving Private Ryan is still unparalleled in filmmaking. Like there's a cute attempt at a full one-shot deal with 1917, but that's kind of gimmicky. A lot of people say it's gimmicky. I love that gimmick, but still, just for a story and characters, I think it's got to go to Saving Private Ryan.
say
That's the
something
last bit
bad
of
about
Spielberg magic, by the way.
say something bad about the Green Knight.
Not enough people saw it.
Very good. This turned from a lightning round back into questions, but where do you think A24 is going with all, they had this HBO deal, but they've been churning out such great films, especially in the horror realm, in the psychological horror realm. Where do you think this heads next for them? Do you think they keep shining, or do you think, at some point they're going to make a flop too?
I mean, they've made, the thing about it is they've made many a flop. A24 I've watched over the years grow to be a cult from film critics, and I am an admitted member of said cult. But their eye for finding stories is in a hot spot right now. Like they never started producing content. They were just a distributor. Someone made a movie,
Right.
they shopped it around, and A24 said, that looks kind of dope or kind of weird or kind of in the brand that we're building. So the powers that be who were deciding we will distribute, buy, or attempt to buy and distribute that movie, those eyes have been spot on recently. And I think they're still in that heat wave. And then they started producing their own original content, which has also been pretty dope. They made Tragedy Macbeth on Apple TV. It's an A24 joint, and it is mwah, as far as cinematography and story, and Denzel Washington is chewing scenery. I think
I am
A24 is going to
shocked that
ride
he
out for a
didn't.
while.
I'm surprised Denzel didn't get all the awards for that.
He got a lot of recognition, not a lot of
Yeah.
awards. And I think, honestly, from a man who already has Oscars, I don't think that's of importance to him. He loves. You could tell he loved chewing into that Shakespeare, that text and being an actor's actor.
he's legitimately like into the craft for the craft, and it's one of the most wonderful things to see, because I don't think that like Brando, if to me, Denzel's our generation's Brando.
Okay.
In a
Yeah.
way, like I think he's that big of a cultural icon, where he's had so many great films, he's done a lot of really good work, he's also brought up a few actors with him, but like, unlike Brando, there isn't a level of creepiness around Denzel Washington. Um,
Right. I
and
100% agree.
and I think in that case, our generation really does want kind of Denzel to be kind of that Brando level actor, because I think we as a generation are finally getting actors who are actually quote unquote good people. I know there's some people that will probably listen and debate that. Um, what what do you think happens with the recasting of Black Panther? Because this is a huge topic on Twitter, and this is something of massive debate. People think that you can't recast Chadwick Boseman. I'm of the opinion that he would probably want to be recasted at this point. I think there was a report within the family that they said that they were cool with it.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
there was.
how how do you feel about the situation
I
as it's
am
progressing?
also on the side of recast the character. I don't understand. Like, this is, we've had multiple Bonds, we've had multiple Batman, we've had multiple Superman. I don't see it would be a no, it wouldn't be a first in the MCU because they recast Terrence Howard, but that was for completely different reasons.
Completely different reasons.
Completely different reasons. I think
I
the
should have
character
just been quiet and just taken that money.
take
Like,
the money, man. Just take the money.
Don Cheadle was like, "That's the right amount of money."
I think the character is bigger than one person. Black
Yeah,
Panther was the first African hero in Marvel Comics. Um, T'Challa is the first African hero in Marvel Comics. I think
yeah,
there's more stories to be told. This robs us of the T'Challa Namor battle that was prevalent all throughout Marvel over the last couple of years. Like, them mugs was beefing heavy for a
right,
while. Like Wakandans went down there and fucked up Atlantis. Atlantis floods Wakanda, and it's a whole lot of wild. And it kind of looks like they might do that in this movie. But I'm on the
right.
recast T'Challa team because I think there's more stories to be told with the character of T'Challa. Now that the character of T'Challa and the Mansel Black Panther obviously can be reinterpreted as maybe two different things, but we need more T'Challa stories.
Can I ask you a personal question? Because
Sure.
I've seen. I remember when I first went to Black Panther, and especially seeing a lot of like young black men who were sitting in the audience, spellbound, and literally saluting along with the
Mm-hmm.
movie. How important is this character culturally, um, for the black community as comic book readers, for film goers? Like, it seems like the debate is really important here, especially among the black entertainment community, in terms of like how this character is treated. Can you explain to the audience that may not understand the importance of what's being talked about here?
Yeah. Uh, it's it's kind of hard to find something to relate it to for white people because you've had all of the iconic people, right? It's not like this is our Han Solo when you've had Han Solo and you've also had Indiana Jones and you've also had Batman and you've also had James
Right.
Bond. We don't really have that, or didn't really have that. Um, as far as the community, it was a showing, a grand spectacle showing of black excellence, which is
Yes.
something that we don't get to see a whole lot of in on the huge screen. I mean, there's still a whole lot of representation of pimps and drug dealers and thugs. And unfortunately, the hip hop community is very guilty of pushing that stereotype as well. You don't get to see a lot of just black people succeeding, and not just succeeding, outpacing everyone else in the world at science and at math and at things that are generally not attributed to, things that black people are known for. It's not
Not just sports and
related,
modeling.
and it's not sports, it's not drug dealing, it's not rapping. It's
Right.
motherfuckers making cool sci-fi shit. We hadn't seen it on that spectacle, and I think it kind of opened up the eyes of younger African American kids as to possibilities. Like if Black Panther were to get more kids into STEM programs, just to try to follow that track, I would be 100% not surprised with that. Much like I think Spider-Verse 18 years from now is going to be the reason why kids are going to school for animation. I
Mm-hmm.
think that that Black Panther might be the reason the kids are influenced into more science and technological and engineering and math programs. It's seeing that display of unabashed, loving blackness. There's no real violent arguing. Things are disputed through conversation and diplomacy. And then you have this guy Killmonger coming in there making cogent points as well, just going about it the wrong kind of way. So it was just, and that being like something like the 18th, 19th, after a whole bunch of white guys out there doing the heroic shit, like we got to see someone else that looks like us out there. Like we'd seen Falcon beforehand, but he was just kind of like the sidekick guy. But
Mm-hmm.
this was like the dude calling the shots here. We already saw what he had been capable of in Civil War, and in just a few minutes on screen of how regal he is and how wise he can be, and stopping Zemo from killing himself. Which, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't do that, then you don't get the Zemo dancing scene in Falcon and Winter Soldier later on. So thanks, T'Challa. It's just like I said, unabashed blackness, man, and seeing the positive side of the African American, and then seeing not just black people, but all sorts of different tribes of black people living together, the border tribes, and these guys representing these guys, and Mbaku up in the mountains and all that kind of stuff. Just black people living in harmony without white people ever having interfered with it. It was just
Right.
something different, man. It was just something weird different.
I think that that's such an important point, like living in harmony without white people ever interfering with it, because I think for a lot of white people, they just can't wrap their head around that concept of we didn't touch this and that's okay. And like, there's something in our heads that still kind of snaps when we hear that. And we're just like, wait a second. No, 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 no. But like, one thing that I thought that Black Panther really did was open up, especially for a lot of like white consumers of storytelling. I think for the first time, Black Panther was like their passport and their gateway to actually look at black characters in that way and actually view those worlds and view those stories where they're not represented at all and still find enjoyment and meaning in them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, one of the beautiful things I find about I think diversity and inclusion as it continues to progress is that for all of the honestly crazy criticisms that are made about shows like Star Trek Discovery and all these other wonderful joints that are out there, these are great stories. And if you actually sit down and watch them, they're great stories. And people are, I think, discovering now more than ever is that you can tell a great story and it matters what the person looks like, but it also doesn't matter what they look like because really they can cross all boundaries. And
Right.
I think Black Panther was a big move towards doing that. Do you think do you think that more characters are going to come along? Do you think that the MCU or Disney can still keep producing characters, or is there a worry in your mind ever that diversity and inclusion? I think there's always the worry that it switches back into just a marketing term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that this growth is going to continue? We're going to still get more positive characters like this, or is there a worry in your mind ever that like this is it? Or
No, no, I think, I mean, you're talking about a company that's been telling stories for like 80 plus years. And in
right?
those 80 plus years, they have literally tens of thousands of characters that they can use. And Stan Lee was at the forefront of diversity inclusion before diversity inclusion was even a thing that people talked about. He said way back in the days, like back in the early MCU days, like Phase One days, like who do you want to see? And his first answer was Black Panther. I want to see Black Panther. Like so, the man's been making these types of characters, and plenty of other people have followed in his tracks. There's lots out there for them to draw the well from. So as long as those characters are treated with the respect they deserve, the respect is given to the writers who wrote these characters beforehand and using those stories, keep it coming. And they have plenty in the tank, and I'm here for it.
So, two more questions. And I promise I'll let you go. Thank
All right,
you
yeah.
so much as always for being part of this, and this has been great.
Yeah.
So I finally watched the last Bond film,
Ah,
and
yeah.
oh boy,
Will
um,
James Bond return? We don't know.
well, like, okay, what do you think of them actually saying we can kill a character and then we can have a new 007 or a new James Bond? And finally acknowledging that maybe that has been what's been happening since Sean
Yeah,
Connery.
time immemorial. Yeah.
Yeah, like all these years, it's just been one Bond dying and another one being activated and just going on and on like that. How do you feel about that kind of acknowledgement in the franchise, and where do you think they go from here with it? I think it's a
Uh,
very, I think it was a very bold storytelling choice that kind of like really set some standards for how things go in the future.
it's a bold storytelling choice that ends in the only way I think his Bond ever could have ended. There was no
Absolutely.
happy ending for this man ever whatsoever. I'm still the camp that it's always been the same one character. And I would almost buy into the
Ah,
theory that different people are codenamed James Bond, but there's one scene that still defies that logic. There's never any reason that Roger Moore's James Bond would put flowers at the grave of George Lazenby's James Bond's wife,
ah,
who dies at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Like, these are two different dudes. Why is a guy just randomly given? Like, so that's why I still think
fair,
it's all one dude.
fair
And
point.
as far as yeah, like James Bond will return in the end, does it really matter? I don't think it does.
Right,
Each Bond has kind of been its own thing. Like Bond is always known for chasing trends, and this trend that they chased was MCU. They kind of made all of these connected and relatable. So that's
right.
all well and done. If they were like, "This is our new James Bond, and we're telling another movie," no one's gonna be like, "Ah, but." People are gonna be like, "Oh, a new Bond movie, dope." I think the overarching amount of people, your general audience, isn't going to care about that. Like, oh, new Bond, just like Roger Moore was just, oh, the new guy in town. All right, cool. Let's get to it.
Fantastic. Last thing, and this is a
Mm-hmm.
fun one. Best book you've read this year, it could be a comic book as well. Best album you've listened to, and the best show or movie you've seen.
All right. Oh, man. Best book. I am currently, I don't know if I'm going to call it the best book. I'm currently in the last book of The Expanse right now,
Oh, nice.
Leviathan Falls. I'm okay with it. The thing about that is they kind of got away from what I loved about it, but that's neither here nor there. Best book, and it could be a comic. Is it's all of Dan Slott's Spider-Man run. I started it.
Really?
I started at the very beginning of the year, and I've just compacted. I think it's like 8 9 years he worked on Spider-Man. I've just chewed
Yeah.
through it this entire year, and I'm on the last leg of that run, and I've been having a blast. This is my first like deep dive into a solo Spider-Man comic, and
Wow.
I've been
Okay.
yeah. I'm more of a team comic book guy. I don't do a whole
Okay.
lot of solo deep dives, but I figured I'd give Spider-Man a try, and I've been loving what Dan Slott's been doing with us. A, his love of Spider-Man is prevalent, and B, what I think really shines through is his love of New York City. That man loves
yeah.
New York City and putting in a lot of like real world New York references all throughout. All the pop culture references he puts in there, not great. But anyways, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna my best book is the Dan Slott Spider-Man run. Best album I've listened to. Man, oh man. I'm gonna go ahead and say, so this is gonna go against all my ethics and morals. When a lot of people in hip hop throw out the term, "Well, this is a classic," without giving
Yeah.
it the time to be a classic. I think if
Amen.
something's going to be a classic, it's got to stand the test of 5, 7, 10 years. And if you've been listening to it that whole time, then it's a classic. So a lot of people will call something a classic that came out 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, no, because you're just going to pivot. They're calling this a classic 2 weeks from now. We are 24 hours removed from, I think, one of the best albums to drop this year. Black Thought of The Roots. If you know the Tonight Show, for all you listening out there, the Roots is his house band. The house band is fronted by Tariq Trotter, aka Black Thought, who has over the last couple of years not broken off from the Roots, but chosen hip hop producers to do small solo projects with, and he just dropped, as of this weekend's recording, a new album on Friday, yesterday, 24 hours ago, and Cheat Codes is the name of the album, and it's what I love most about hip hop: lyricism. Just play with words to my heart's content. Give me similes, give me metaphors, give me turns of phrases, give me alliteration. He is good with all of that. And on the penultimate track, I think, we get what is, I do believe, to be the last recorded guest verse from MF Doom before he passed. And it is such a ridiculous verse, and it's wonderful, and it filled my heart with joy to hear something new from Doom one last time. So that's best album.
Yeah.
Cheat Codes, Black Thought. You said best book, best album. What was the best TV show? Is that what you said?
Best TV show or movie, because I know you have to consume so much.
Oh, man. As cliche as it might be, as far as TV shows, cliche as it might be, I still got to give it to Stranger Things 4. Like, 1 was a smash, 2 kind of dipped, 3 was a return to form, 4 might be the best season they've done so far. You know, whenever they make like ensemble projects, they start together, they explode out, aka Two Towers, and then they bring them all back together at the end. And it seems like we are coming towards the bringing them all back together for the final season. And what we got, I mean, the love for the Eddie Munson character was all over Twitter and whatnot. I just enjoyed every part of that. Movie, it's still Top Gun Maverick, dude. It's sitting at my number 1 right now. And like I said earlier, it's practical effects. It's a good story.
Okay, so what are you looking? One last thing. What are you looking forward to? If there's one thing that you're looking forward to, besides your wedding, but like,
besides the wedding, definitely looking forward to that.
Is there anything out there on the horizon that you're really looking forward to?
It's Wakanda Forever, which is again like a cheap cliched answer, because it's part of it's just curious as to how are you going to handle this situation. With the death of Chadwick Boseman, and also we have finally brought Namor into the mix, which is just the world's second most dickish villain that Marvel has had outside of Doctor Doom. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Outside of the comic book realm, what's up?
Who is your casting pick for Doom? I've been wanting to ask you this, and I almost forgot it. He's one of my favorite villains. He's one of your favorite villains. Arguably, for bringing the Fantastic Four into the MCU, you can't do it without Doom. I have a storyline in my head about how you introduce him, but I think we all have a storyline in our head about how he comes in.
Well,
do you want to see him, and if so, like, how would you want to see him?
The end credits of Wakanda Forever, which is where I think we're going to see him. I think kind of having an idea of what the story is, I think Doom might have some hands behind what is happening in that movie, which will be revealed in the end credits. As far as like Doom he's Latvian dude. Well, he's the ruler of Latvian. I don't think he's Latvian by birth, but he is like that general Eastern European type. So
Yeah, I think isn't he
so,
like, isn't he kind of a bastard character, if I
yeah.
remember?
Yeah, he is. I
Yeah.
think he's like partially Romanian or something crazy like that. Give
Yeah.
me, as much as it pains me to say it, I still think after all this time I got to go with Cillian Murphy, dude.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
on Killian. I mean, Peaky Blinders is done now, so his schedule should be opened up. So I don't. I go. He's Oppenheimer is about done being filmed. So just give me that Cillian Murphy, dude.
I have to say, I'm a little excited for Oppenheimer. I think that could. I think that's a sleeper hit.
I'm excited for
Just because
Oppenheimer
the
and
story.
Barbie.
Yeah. Oh, Barbie's gonna make so much ridiculous money, and like just the clothing itself already, like it's gonna be a cultural moment for so many people. We're gonna see people in neon and like confetti and shit for like
Yeah,
it's
it's
gonna
going
make
to be great
pumpkin
to
spice
see.
fall. Yeah,
Oh no,
it's
it's
gonna
going to
make
make for some
pumpkin spice
interesting
fall look.
Halloween.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
DARRYL, thank you so much for joining me. Um, you've always been a great friend and a huge supporter of the show. Arguably, Pondering the Orb wouldn't be here without Poprika.
Hey.
So thank you so much for everything that you've done in this business, and thank you for your continued success. And I hope you keep going, and I hope you will, of course, one day come back here.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime you ask me here, I will be here. That's without a given open invitation. It will always be accepted by me. Please continue to put words to paper. You're a voice out here. I think that is needed. Your ideas are fresh and original. Motherfuckers writing stories, fantasy stories where tea is involved. Like, give me that. Give me my written oolong in my life, sir, so I can continue to ingest and absorb all your great words.
Thank you so much, my friend. I'll see you soon.
All right, hey, have a good one out there.
I want to dedicate this episode to DARRYL and Leslie. When this episode debuts, they will be happily married, and I wish them nothing but blessing as they continue their journey together. Some people may not know this about me, but I pray, and in thanking of both my friend and his new wife, I would like to recite an invocation from the Carmina Gadelica, a book of my people. Thank you for joining me on Pondering the Orb. Please like and subscribe, and safe journeys. Invocation of the Graces. The grace placed by Bridget, Maiden of Graces, and the daughter of the King, Gil-men the Beauteous. Form of courage before thee, form of love behind thee, stream of spirit through thee, to secure and aid thee. Grace upwards over thee, grace downwards over thee. Grace of graces without gainsaying. Grace of courage and of love. Grace of form, grace of fortune, grace of voice. Grace of love be ever thine. Grace of the image of courage be thine. Excellence of men, excellence of women, excellence of lover, excellence of son and daughters be thine, if you choose. Excellence of corn, excellence of drink, excellence of music, excellence of guiding, excellence of time and land be thine. Excellence of sitting, excellence of journeying, excellence of cattle, excellence of churning, excellence of curds and butter be thine. Excellence of the duck of Mary, excellence of the swan of the fountain, excellence of sheep and of wool, excellence of kids and of goats, lasting excellence by day and night be thine. To my friend DARRYL and his wife Leslie. Graces of the love of the skies be thine. Graces of the love of the stars be thine. Graces of the love of the moon be thine. Graces of the love of the sun be thine. Graces of the love and the crown of heaven be thine.